I can't express how happy and excited it makes me to be gathering together in person. Look, there's so many of you, and we're all in the room together. If I'm honest, I will admit that maybe it's a little bit overwhelming because this is for sure the biggest meeting that I've been at in person in almost 3 years. I don't know about all of you. It's great to be back in the seaweed space again with many of the same partners who joined us in 2019 and 2020 for our seaweed farming workshop and our intensive 3-day seaweed farming training. I want to offer a particular shout out to our partners then and now, the Puget Sound Restoration Fund and the Nature Conservancy, whose support and guidance has been invaluable in this work. Some of you might remember that we wrapped up the intensive seaweed farm training in early 2020, literally just days before the world changed forever. And thanks to the enthusiasm and community coming out of that workshop and training and the persevering through the last few years and all of the craziness, we've continued this work thanks largely to the heart of Meg Chadsey. And our gathering today is supported. I know, that's there's going to be another Meg Chadsey shout out, so we'll have lots of time. Our work today is supported by the Builders Initiative, so it's so lovely to be back together again, and we really appreciate all of you. So why are we here today? Meg is going to give us way more information about why we're here today and orientation and all of those sorts of things, but I just wanted to share my reflection briefly, which is that I am here to learn. Right? There are a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainties about the future of seaweed cultivation in Washington. We all need reliable information to support informed choices about this future. What will it look like? What do we need to know? How do we get there? So I'm here to learn, and I really appreciate all of you being here to learn together. Before I turn it over to Meg to get us started for real, I just want to offer a few quick but very important thanks. In addition to funding, it takes amazing and dedicated people to actually make things happen. So I want to offer huge thanks and recognition to our small and mighty Washington Sea Grant team who put all this together, most significantly with the leadership of Meg Chadsey, who I'm sure most of you know by now. And also huge and significant contributions from Nicole Naar, who's probably still out at the checkout desk sorting name tags, and Terry King. They could not have done any of this without the superstar steering committee that we've had for this event. So I just want to recognize those folks that are up on the screen: Diane Boratin, Charlotte Dorn, Dan Tennis, Cecilia Gobin, Molly Bogerberg, Laura Butler, Joth Davis, Max Calloway, Nicole Naar, Kathy Peters, Molly Aldofsson, and Kathy Van Alstine. Huge thank you to each and every one of you for your help in making today happen. I also want to thank all of our presenters. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and perspective with us. And really, thanks again to all of you for coming together to learn. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you all have a great day. And I'm going to pass it over to Meg so that we can actually get started with the fun.
I am Meg Chadsey, AKA WSG Seaweed, if you haven't figured that out. And 1/3 of the band, the brave band at Sea Grant called the Seaweed Sisters, me, Terry, and Nicole Naar, and I use she, her pronouns. I am Washington Sea Grant's ocean acidification specialist, but I do a lot of seaweed. So just a quick backstory, and I will speed through the unnecessary parts of this introduction. This was me, I think, end of February 2020. We had just wrapped up our first, in a long time, seaweed trainings. The 2019 workshop and the 3-day intensive training in February 2020. And I had cleaned my desk in my office for the first time in years. That is the cleanest it's ever been. And I was sitting back there thinking, well, that's it. We've taken care of seaweed. All those people who wanted to know things are satisfied, and they won't call Sea Grant anymore, and we've done our job. So, the problem was, these people, some of you may recognize yourselves. This was the conclusion, the 3rd day of our seaweed training workshop. And people, if you can see, there's a lot of smiles in this picture. We're out at the NOAA Manchester facility where the Puget Sound Restoration Fund has their their own hatchery. And this group of people did not want to stop after 3 days. And this, for some reason, I didn't anticipate this, but at the very conclusion of this training, a volunteer stood up and said, let's just keep this going. Let's declare ourselves the Washington Seaweed Community of Practice. That's how we started. And then the pandemic came, and then everybody went virtual. And so we were able to keep this community going and growing over the next almost 3 years now. We are now a much more official group. We call ourselves the Washington Seaweed Collaborative. You've seen that webpage, I think, because you had to sign up that way. That website only launched the day we launched registration. That's how new this kind of formal second generation of the Seaweed Collaborative is. But what it's meant to be is an informal network of, at this point, over 170 members. And our commitment is to supporting the cultivation and stewardship of seaweed, which includes kelp, for commercial, cultural, and environmental purposes. So that's a pretty broad umbrella, and I don't think we've yet tried to narrow that focus at all. All right, so this is our brand new shiny website. Most of you have seen this. I think the tagline says it all. This group of practitioners and engaged people is supporting responsible seaweed farming for harvest and restoration. So that currently is about 1/2 of Washington Sea Grant's programming around seaweed. And the other half is this. It's the Seaweed Knowledge Symposium. The funding that we received from the Builders Initiative supports both programs. Why are we doing a Seaweed Knowledge Symposium? Well, kind of for the same reasons that we are continuing to support the Washington Seaweed Collaborative. And that is because the interest that led us to develop those trainings 2.5 or 3 years ago is still there, and of course it's even growing. People are there's something about seaweed. You can see it in people's eyes. When they're coming at you at a meeting, you can say, oh, here comes someone who wants to talk about seaweed with me. It happens all the time. People love it. And when you hear from Betsy Peabody, she captures that excitement so well. But unlike several years ago, there's increasingly the sort of information, the how-to training, available from other sources. And so Washington Sea Grant is trying to make the most of our capacity. Where can we help out the most? Is it turning out another guidance manual? Personally, I don't think so, because I would have to write that, and I don't feel qualified yet, even after several years. But what Washington Sea Grant can do is what we often do in many contexts. We convene and we support informed decision-making. That is our role. We bring together all the people who are engaged in an area, and we try to make sure that you all have the best available information or knowledge that you can have to make the decisions that you want to make. And we try to promote collective, collaborative decision-making. So that's why that's what I call next level support for Sea Grant. So these symposium goals, you have these in your program, so I won't go through these. I added a couple specific Washington Sea Grant goals for this symposium late last night. And just to let you know that we are going to be documenting all the conversation and the questions and the good stuff that comes out of this conversation today. We're taking notes. We're going to make these recordings available. We're going to be working to turn out sort of a synthesis document and then share that document with everybody, because we want you to take the outcomes of this symposium and roll with them and collaborate and learn together. And the other goal for Washington Sea Grant is to seed the WSC, the Washington Seaweed Collaborative, with information they can pick up and run with. Our vision going forward for the collaborative is that we'll have some objectives. We'll be turning out information products. We'll be offering guidance. Details remain to be determined, but we're going to learn a lot from this symposium and figure out what the community wants and needs to know, and we're going to try and meet those needs. So, why a Washington seaweed symposium? Well, Washington is, like any seaweed growing region, unique. There is something extra in Washington that makes the seaweed and aquaculture arena unique, I would say, and that is because in Washington state, treaty tribes have had their treaty rights affirmed decades ago by a landmark Bolt decision. And what that legal decision affirmed was that the United States federal government has a trust responsibility to the tribes to protect their trust resources that were agreed upon in treaties and protect those treaty rights. And because of this, the tribes in Washington state, treaty tribes are co-managers of natural resources, of marine resources with the state. And as co-managers of these resources, which encompass many species and habitats, they have the authority to oppose activities that would interfere with their ability to exercise their treaty-guaranteed rights to fish and gather. And so for that reason, this is something everyone who even thinks about farming seaweed in Washington, for whatever purpose, should have in their brains right at the beginning. It is imperative to consult early in your process with any tribes whose usual and accustomed harvest and fishing areas are in the vicinity of your proposed project. Talk with tribal representatives. Do not assume that the outcome will be the one that you desire. It's just not that way. It is the tribe's authority to determine what happens in these waters. And so that is paramount, and it really shapes the way aquaculture develops in this state. And as seaweed farming and seaweed aquaculture and cultivation is new in our state, so there's a lot of development ahead of us. And so let's make sure collectively that we support that development in the best possible way, and that includes respecting and working with tribes. All right, this is a brilliant schematic just to represent another point that you're going to think about today as you hear presentations. This is one genius social scientist's interpretation of the question, what is seaweed aquaculture? What is aquaculture after all? And this is not the answer, this is Nicole's answer. And I like it. I could quibble with some things, and I bet that all of you are thinking, that's not exactly the way I would describe aquaculture. This is aquaculture. I don't think this is seaweed aquaculture. And what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of different perspectives and opinions about what seaweed aquaculture is. And we're not going to solve that problem today. It's not a problem, it's a good thing, but we're not going to come to a common definition today. But what we can do is just keep in our minds the awareness that when you say seaweed farming, cultivation, aquaculture to someone, your mental model might be different from theirs. And so be ready to rethink what you're talking about and adjust. And part of that, I think, leads into, this is what I hope for this community now and into the future. These are the things that I think also we need to be aware of and accept in this seaweed aquaculture realm. As I said, it's new. We're a little bit behind other parts of the US and certainly other parts of the world. I would say it's true that there are more unknowns about seaweed aquaculture, about the science, about the policy, about the impacts to human and non-human communities than there are knowns. But at this early stage, while things are still small in number and small in size, and maybe they will remain that way forever, farms and restoration work, like what Puget Sound Restoration does, offer opportunities for us to figure out some of these unknowns and learn together if we choose to take that opportunity. And the thing about learning is if you learn something and then you don't change the way you're doing something, I think that's the definition of insanity. But we need to foster a culture of adaptive management, about being able to take things we learn and saying, I know we, said we'd do it this way for 12 straight years, but now it doesn't seem like the best way to do that. What if we change your practice? We need to have that, I think, we need to have that kind of ability and to do adaptive management. And I know that that's hard, and I know that that poses lots of challenges. People need certainty, people need long-term stability, but we need to be open to the idea that we can change, and then be gracious to each other about that. I may be rambling because I'm at this point I'm ad-libbing, but I think the last three things will help us. A mindset of curiosity when we're talking to each other about seaweed cultivation, and acceptance that there is uncertainty, and then a willing to collaborate. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk about collaboration and also some just straight up logistics for the day.
Good morning. Buenos dias, everyone. I am Nicole Naar. I use she, her pronouns. I am a social science and education specialist at Washington Sea Grant. And before I turn things back over to Meg, I just wanted to reflect and share with you all a little bit about what the spirit we have in mind for today's symposium is. So we're really here today in a spirit of collaboration, which one definition of collaboration is the action of working with someone to produce or create something. And that's really what we're here to do. We can think of it as collectively putting together a puzzle. And every perspective and person in the room has information and insight, a puzzle piece that is relevant to putting that puzzle together. So we're really going to try and approach our interactions today with this spirit of collaboration. And with that in mind, we have some participant agreements for you all. These are in the agenda as well, if you need to reference them. So the first one is that Q&A is for questions. There will be other platforms at the symposium today for sharing comments and expressing your opinions. So please keep that in mind. Also, please be aware this is a public meeting. So your questions and comments will be recorded and documented in some way. Thanks, Meg. And attributed to you as an individual. We'll ask that you share your name before commenting. The third agreement is to share your knowledge and perspective openly and honestly, but to make sure that you leave space for others to do the same. Next, we want to make sure that we're listening and remaining open to each other's differing points of view. We want to try to assume best intentions, but not anything else. So ask questions if there's something that you feel like you need to understand a little bit better, or that at first listening sounds unclear or troubling. And lastly, harassment or discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated. So a few elements of logistics for how we're going to run Q&A and discussion today. You have several ways to participate. The first three that I'll go over are what we might call real-time options. So we'll sort of combine and aggregate and alternate between these to strike an equitable balance. But your first option is to come up to one of these microphones, if you are willing and able, here at the front of the room for each Q&A section. State your name and ask a specific presenter or group of presenters your question. If that seems a little difficult, given where you're seated, we also have question cards. So you should all have a pen and index cards in your seats that you can use to write your name and a question, and then pass them down to end up in the question card bags. And we'll have runners come and collect those cards periodically throughout the panels so that we have those cards and we can read your question to be answered to the panelists here. Yes? Yes, we won't get to all of the questions, right? There's a certain amount of time. But if they're written down, we'll have them to document and follow up with. We'll let our speakers know if you had specific questions for them that they might be able to answer offline. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you wanted to step up to the mic and ask a question and didn't get to it, maybe write it on a question card. Or submit it via Padlet. So here's the Padlet, the website for the Padlet. You'll have to use cellular data if you're using that. It is a free account. I don't think I've gotten a single email since I signed up for that account, so good thing to know. They don't spam your inbox. If you create a free account, then your comments and questions will automatically be attributed to you. And it sort of has a similar interface as Facebook, where you can sort of like comments or questions and respond to them as well, and it will automatically be attributed to your name if you have an account. If you don't have an account, you should still be able to access it, but we're asking that you sort of sign, indicate who you are, and your anonymous post your questions and comments. So Padlet is one of these spaces where there is an opportunity for you to share your comments and opinions in addition to your questions. The last option for participating in Q&A and discussion is the marina or the parking lot. So this is not in real time. I'll be collecting these probably at our bio breaks and lunch breaks and collating them and making sure we have a record of them, but they'll not be incorporated into our sort of live back and forth Q&A and discussion. But you can write your name on a Post-it note and park any thoughts that you have in the marina. So this is a good space for, again, questions that are maybe not super urgent or more general, not directed at like a specific speaker perhaps. Or if you want to share comments or opinions, the marina is a good place to park those thoughts. And a last logistical note on Symposium surveys. Hopefully all of you completed the pre-meeting survey. There will also be a post-meeting survey that we'll send out to folks in March. And the idea here is to try to get a sense of like, did holding a symposium actually serve one of the main purposes, which is to increase connection and communication within the broader seaweed community. So we'll be able to apply some social network analysis techniques to look and see if the frequency or the intensity of communication between different constituent groups changed as a result of the symposium. And this will be done, I know everybody individually is answering these questions, but we're going to aggregate stuff at the institutional level. So we'll be looking at connections, for example, between DNR and Washington Sea Grant. So not individual, but institutional. And we'll be sure to share the fun network diagrams that result from those when we have those ready for you. There will also be an exit survey to just kind of evaluate how the symposium went. That will be sent out probably on Monday. We'll also include some questions from a fellow at the Nature Conservancy who's conducting a seaweed aquaculture situation analysis. So please answer that exit survey. The survey also includes an opt-in or out for sharing participant contact information, so your name and your email. If you don't opt in to sharing your contact information with other participants, you won't receive the list of other participants' contact information. So there's a little bit of reciprocity there. If you want to have other folks' info, you got to give your info. But you'll have a chance in that exit survey to opt in or opt out.